Now, I'm not the sort of person that ever calls for vandalism or anything like that. Generally speaking, vandalism is bad. End of. However, there is somebody going around at the moment with a pair of cutters that's adjusting, shall we say, the Ulez cameras. Normally, I'd say this is a bad thing, but as these cameras actually have nothing to do with the green agenda at all, right? They say they do, all right? But if they were to basically be against air pollution, they would say that these cars that don't meet with their criteria simply can't come into London. But they don't. They say you can come in, but you can get charged. So it simply is just to make money. Now, most people had already worked this out because you've got the congestion charge in London and you've got the clean air zone, two different things. So, and they're expanding it at the moment, and it's going to cost people 12 plus quid to get off their drive and use their own vehicles. Now, I believe it's bollocks, but I also believe that the reason these people going around and adjusting these cameras in the way that they are, okay, the reason I'm going to say this is a good thing is because this is like the precursor to the 15-minute cities, and the 15-minute cities will monitor people coming and going out of their own area. Now, this country was given to us, whether you believe it or not, by the good Lord himself, right? Now, some of you aren't religious, okay, so come up with your own explanation, but either way, no one man should be able, or woman, or whatever, should be able to tell you where you can go, because at the end of the day, he lives, eats, shits and breathes the same as you do, same as I do. And I'm one of these people that really don't like authority. I never did, but I do believe that there needs to be a certain amount of laws, right, and a certain amount of rules for us all to rub along together without doing each other harm. But I believe that what we have at the moment now is a massive over-policing. We have surveillance that's ridiculous. Now, bearing in mind, London is the most CCTV'd cameraed, or it was in the 90s and 2000, city in the world. And yet, whenever any crime goes off that basically people say, where's the CCTV footage for that? Take, for instance, a lot of the alleged terrorism and stuff like that. Or something that you need. The cameras don't work. And I'm believing now that the cameras are to fit us up, not to help us out. They're not for our security, they're to track us. I hate these cameras. Now, in a world where these 15-minute city things are going to be a thing, people will need to work out whether they want to go along with it or whether they don't. Just remember this, the only reason we're governed is because we accept it. Now, a lot of you are just going, all right. But if everybody, say for instance, and I'm just saying hypothetically speaking, if everybody tomorrow drove into London without paying their fine and everybody at the same time said when they got a letter, sod you, I'm not paying, end of. If everybody did it, or if better still, people got off their ass and went in their millions into London, I should say, and went, we aren't doing it anymore. You've taken their power away. You've seen the cartoon and it's got all these people with this one with a whip, and he's whipping and everybody gets down. And then in the next clip, you see one get up and he's whipping. Then you see 5 in the next clip. Then all of a sudden, everybody gets up and the guy with the whip gets down. That's there for a reason. It means something. These people do not realise, actually, or maybe they do, or maybe it's us that don't realise, the whole point of having, say, for instance, politicians and a Lord Mayor and that kind of government, right, is so that they can take care of the day-to-day stuff that we put them in charge of, right, and make sure that the country takes over. But what they actually do is they serve people above them who lobby them, and they serve themselves. And they hate you. Make no bones about it. The 1%, and even the lower than that, right, the most of the people within government, right, realise that we are a huge threat to them. If we ever cottoned on to what was happening, that there would be a revolution. But that most people out there just want to rub along. They don't want the grief. They don't want the hassle. Many of them are starting to wake up, but they still don't know how to face it. Most of them are so entrenched in the it's impossible, we can't change anything, that they've given up. But just these little acts of one man going around completely covered up, adjusting things like Ulez is a start, right? And as I said, I would have never called for it before, but you don't tell the British people where they can and can't go. That is not your job. Your job is to take care of the business of this country, and that is it. All of this money that you take from the clean air, where does it actually go? And this is the thing. I watched that film Oppenheimer, and I worked out that what they did was they rubbished him. They ruined his name because they realised that the nuclear arms race was going to make the people who were at the very, very top, the globalists, etc., and the politicians that went along with it, unbelievable amounts of money. If you look at the arms race in the Second World War to build the hydrogen bomb, the U-bomb, there was two different bombs. One was a hydrogen bomb. I can't remember what the other one was. It was billions back then, and that's an unbelievable amount of money. And the military-industrial complex took that on after. And Oppenheimer was saying, look, the only reason we wanted this war was to stop the Germans having it before us. And after that, when we realised that the Germans were on their knees or finished, we really, really weren't happy about it. But what you said is that this bomb, if we actually let it go over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which they weren't happy about, would save Japanese lives and save American soldiers. So as much as they weren't happy about it, and he used that Hindu quote, which there's a lot more to it, but I have become deaf. He used that quote, and he never got over it. But what happened was, because he was so anti-war, that the system, the powers that be, bearing in mind he was Jewish, by the way, so, you know, everybody thinks, oh, the Jews all stick together. They don't, by the way. And the system went after him and rubbished him. And at a later date, then gave him a few awards and stuff like that to make themselves look good about, look, we were the first to the post with the nuclear arms race. But what that ended up doing was giving us the ability to be able to destroy ourselves. Not just that, it made millions of people worried all over the world. Millions and millions of people were worried because the Russian people were worried that the Americans would launch. The English people were worried that the Russians would launch, or the Americans would launch. The Americans were worried that the Russians would launch. And then we all spent stupid amount of the taxpayers' money arming ourselves to the teeth to make sure that we could be a big enough threat to the other side. Because if the other side launched, we couldn't stop it. We could only then launch at them. And that was the mutually assured destruction. But who benefited out of that? Well, the military-industrial complex, the people that feed the military-industrial complex, the globalists, and the politicians that were lobbied by said globalists. And this is where we are today. The latest thing at the moment is the green agenda. We've had our war in Europe in the First and Second World War, and they said they couldn't do it for another 70 years or more because obviously all the bills had to be paid because the globalists loaned money to all sides to pay for the war, and then basically hiked up the interest rates so that they were paying an astronomical amount back until I think the 90s, 2000. They moved their war over to Asia, and then they also had the trouble that they got involved in and destabilization in the Middle East. And now they've worked out that what they can do is destroy Europe again through civil war, and there's a lot of money to be made in this. But in between that, what they're also going to do is turn him against her, that group against this group, and they're going to do it by people who actually really care about the planet but haven't really got a fucking clue because they listen to everything their teachers said, everything their university said, and everything the news said. We'll come out and hate on people like us because we'll say this green agenda is bullshit. Give an instance. They want, by 2035, us all to be driving around in electric-powered lorries. Now, there was a guy who looked into the viability of this. And when they looked at how much this would need to take in charge overnight, they went to the power company that was local to them. And they said, this is what we need. And the power company just laughed at them. What's funny about this? This is what we need. He said, this is not doable. We couldn't even lay on that amount of power. He said, your business wants to take more power than, and they said that this part of the country takes, this small part of the country. He says, it's just not doable. This is a ridiculous thing. Bearing in mind the green agenda that wants to save the planet. A battery to work a truck would be about 7 tons. That's 7 tons extra weight on top of that truck. Bearing in mind that, say for instance, the engine and the gearbox on this truck here that I'm in would be, I don't know, at best 1.5 tons, right? So 7 tons, right, just for the battery. Now, what are the electric motors going to weigh? Because they're going to be one hell of a size. Take that in. And then the charging every night. And then what happens when the power, they decide to hoik that up because they've got us all over a barrel, which they will. It's ridiculous. But also, all that extra weight will put up the overall weight of the truck. Well, we can't go on the road with that. So what we'll end up doing is reducing our payload by about 7 tons. Well, that makes it much less efficient. But in the process of sending us all over to this, the globalists will make trillions. And that's all it's about. And that's all Ulez is about. That's all the green agenda is about. For every carbon footprint tax that they tax us, where does it go? Where does that money end up? Because I'm telling you now, if you could actually tax somebody and it would make a difference to the environment, and I mean, you could say, for instance, pay God and offset that, I would go along with it. But when you've got countries who don't play this game, who aren't interested, who have, or they're starting up new coal power fire stations, and let's be honest, with a coal power fire station, or a coal-fired power station, I should say, well done, science early, with the modern day exhausting and scrubbing that they have and the reburning, the amount that's going to put out is nowhere near what an old coal-powered or coal-fired power station used to be. So it's a different proposition. However, there's countries, as I say, whose carbon footprint is off the charts. And they don't give a shit and they don't want to play the game. But for the people in power, in government, when they get lobbied by the likes of people who want to push the green agenda, if you get this in, old boy, we'll make you huge sums of personal money. Don't forget, most of the people that go into politics are corrupt. They're psychopaths or sociopaths, they're narcissists, they've got all the worst qualities of a human being, all the worst qualities that you could muster. And these are the people that seek power, and they seek it for their own gain. Very few decent men ever want to get anywhere near politics because they realise how grubby and how awful it is, and they'll have to rub shoulders with paedophiles and narcissists, sociopaths, greedmongers, and some of the most evil creatures that ever walk the face of the planet. That's why they don't want to be involved. And incidentally, my view, that's why the people who least want to do it should be the people you want to encourage the most, because they'd probably be the best. But going back to this thing, when they bring out the 15-minute cities and start putting cameras up, you want to keep your eye out on what this bloke's doing at the moment that's wandering around with his adjustables, we'll call it. Now I have to watch what I say in here because obviously I do. However, bear it in mind that if they can't see you, that's half the battle. But also, the thing that I'm talking at now, my mobile phone, is the biggest spy, the biggest grass going. Second to that would probably be your computer. Then after that, your TV, or anything else that they call smart. Anything that they call smart this or smart that generally has something in it to give away your details. So there it is. Right, well look, I'm going to get off now and get underpaid and overworked, as you do. And I haven't put out much content because I just got to the point of what difference does it make? Now, you might say it does. But when because you know what I'm like, I've got bipolar, so I'll get depression and then I'll come out of it. Probably coming out of it now. But when you are depressed, you just look at it and you think, what difference does my channel and a few things that I say make a difference? And obviously when you pull your head out your ass, maybe they do. There you go. That's for you to decide, not me. But that's why I haven't done a lot lately. And it's kind of hard to put on a live stream when you're not very upbeat. So that's why I haven't done a few. Anyway, I'm off because I think my mate's going to come over and speak to me. So I'll speak to you in a bit. Bye.